I mentioned this last night. We didn't get a chance to really talk about it. There's a satanic black mass that has gotten the green light. And the Satanists, you have to give them credit. They really have been doing a lot of great trolling recently.
That's because they're not really Satanists.
Well, Mark, that's an interesting statement. I mean, what defines a Satanist?
A person who genuinely worships Satan.
So you mean like the LaVeyan Satanists are not actual Satanists
Nope.
to your mind?
They're really not.
Right.
The LaVeyan Satanist, this guy, Anton LaVey, the carny hawker that decided to put together a religion that has, is basically, humanism with a different name on it. He's a troll from way back. No.
Hey,
No.
Morty, I'm a troll from way back. Let me tell you.
I mean, you've got to, the way Christians raise their arms and sing and lift their eyes towards heaven, praising God. You have to do that crap to Satan. Now, you may put your arms down. I'm not exactly sure how you do it, but you have to mean it. If you don't mean it, you're just a jerk.
Well, maybe
You gotta mean it. You gotta troll like we used to do back in the old country.
Well, now, how do you tell between somebody who's trolling about being a Satan worshiper and someone who means it?
At this point, my assumption is you aren't a Satanist. That's my assumption. Like, you're going to have to show me.
Well, they are going to perform a black mass, apparently, in Oklahoma City.
I think if you have a black mass, you should have it removed.
Will something be sacrificed?
Well, they're going to have to change the rules of the Black Mass due to certain city ordinances. Here's a story from WND.com, the WorldNet Daily, who I imagine are not very much in favor of this particular thing happening.
They should really like religious freedom.
The Catholic Archbishop of Oklahoma City has agreed to drop a lawsuit against a satanic cult that plans to perform a black mass in the city now that the cult has returned a stolen consecrated host to the church. An Oklahoma-based satanic group called the Dogma of Angra Mainyu has leased space, and they, by the way, do have a website. I will link to it here in a little bit. Has leased space in the Civic Center Music Hall, which is owned and operated by the city, for a black mass on September 21st. The event is booked into the City Space Theater, the facility's smallest theater space, according to the public information bureaucrat for the Civic Center. She told WND the city will not block the mass from being held, despite an uproar among Christian and family groups, which are mobilizing to stop it. All activities.
See, I just think that's ridiculous.
What part of that is ridiculous?
The mobilizing to stop it.
Okay.
Isn't
that just going to give it more attention?
Yeah, stop giving them attention.
See, I don't know if this makes me prejudiced against black folks or if it makes me prejudiced against Satanists, but when I hear the term black mass, I think like dancing and music. I think of a religious mass that's like, the really upbeat ones with like the
tambourines.
Yeah, sure. The loud choirs like, "Are you ready for a miracle? Ready as I can be." That kind of like stuff. Like the real.
When
you
think of black mass, you think
sure.
a mass.
I think of like the Blues Brothers, that scene.
Gotcha.
Where they're like doing
in the church
cartwheels down the aisles and stuff.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be like that.
I think that this. I think it's silly to give them. Obviously, this is trolling. It's trolling because of the religious freedom of other people. People are showing, hey, look, this is what religious freedom looks like. I think this is it's fair ball, but if you don't like what someone's doing, don't give it a lot of attention.
Well, so the Dogma of Angra Mainyu, and I don't know what that stands for, but they do have a website, and maybe we can dig into that here in a little bit. But, quote, according to the spokesbureaucrat for the Civic Center, all activities during the event must abide by our local ordinances and laws, including laws that govern nudity, lewd acts, ritual sacrifice, as well as building codes for open flames. So basically, by having it at the city center, they're going to take all the fun out of the black mass.
Gonna have like one of those flickering lights you use during Christmas instead.
The electric lights, you mean?
Yeah, it's going to have to be.
The Civic Center Music Hall is not underwriting this event in any way, nor paying for outside advertising. Individuals wishing to attend must purchase a ticket to get in. The Catholic Archdiocese has come out strongly against the Satanist plans. It filed a lawsuit earlier this month to stop the cult from using a stolen consecrated host for its service, calling it a sacrilege that is offensive to all Christians.
So they've stolen an item, then they should give it back.
Well, the story says that the cult has returned the stolen consecrated host. What is a consecrated host anyway? That's some sort of
It's a cup.
thing? Oh, it's a cup.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a
I'm
special.
trying to figure out what it is by being on docraofangramanu.com.
It's a special cup.
Calling it a
It's a
sacrilege,
magic cup.
offensive to all Christians,
Lucky cup.
Satanists typically defile a Catholic host used to celebrate Holy Communion during their black services. Archbishop Paul, I don't know what they do to defile it exactly, but I imagine
I don't
many
really
of the,
need to know.
I imagine many of the things that you might do to defile something could be banned by the venue's rules and the local ordinances here. Satanists, again, during their black services. Archbishop Paul Coakley has made repeated requests for the city's leaders to cancel the satanic ritual in a publicly funded facility. He said in his August 21st statement, quote, I have
But they
raised...
can't. That's the point.
Right.
If you can have your religious event at a publicly funded venue,
They should be
then
able to
they
have
can
theirs.
have theirs. That's the whole point of this. And this is the funny part about Christians talking about how they are how they're despised and how they're
that people are working against them, that kind of thing.
the
persecuted Christians.
Right. They're constantly under some kind of imagined persecution,
Right.
And all the while messing with everybody else. And look, I understand most Christians don't do this, but the Christians that do this, that they get all whipped up. I mean, this isn't a group of snake-bitten radicals. This is the Catholic Church,
Right.
The Catholic diocese that's doing this. That means that major religious organizations are standing against these Satanists. I'm using quotation marks. These trolls from having their pretend religious service just to mess with people.
So I found an interesting paragraph here from docraofangramanu.com or angramanu.com. Where it says, the dogma of Angramanu is about freedom from any religion that chooses to bind you to some type of dogma that forces you to restrain your natural animal instincts. They say desire and sin move you away from the ultimate consumer of souls through fire. Ahura Mazda is the slave driver that forces laws onto mankind that are completely against man's nature.
I don't know. These guys sound like
That's
they might be real
Zoroastrian.
Satanists.
Yeah, it says, although only through spiritual and chaotic destruction of this enslavement will one become spiritually free from not only the moral, ethical enslavement, including freedom from Atar, which is the holy fire that will consume your soul and recharge Ahura Mazda. I guess this Angramanu guy is supposed to be the destroyer. And that's I guess what the term is. So they're worshiping this Angramanu, which is like a destroyer.
Yeah, the word Satan doesn't actually appear anywhere on this particular page.
There's Zoroastrian. Are you not familiar with this Ahura Mazda fella? I'm trying to figure out whether...
I don't know what Zoroastrian means.
This is history class for me, and it's very difficult.
All right, well,
Zoroastrianism is the thing that Judaism came out of, and then the thing, of course, that Christianity came out of, which, of course, is the thing that Islam came out of. So it is the old religion, the religion of the fire is what it's called. And now you have just about all of my knowledge on Zoroastrianism.
All right, well, we'll find out more about this here in moments. Plus, there's a little bit more about the Black Mass. People are upset about it, but, of course, as Mark correctly pointed out, the more people in the Christian religion get upset about this, the more they crow about it, the more attention this particular Black Mass will receive. But how are they going to change the Black Mass to make it acceptable for this public venue? We'll come back with more. 855-450-FREE. That's the toll-free number here tonight. You can take control of the airwaves on Free Talk Live. More coming up. A alleged satanic cult will be participating in a Black Mass taking place in Oklahoma City, and as is predictable, many Christians are upset about this and have taken to the streets and or the news media in an attempt, or apparently the courts, apparently the archdiocese, the Catholic archdiocese, sued the church, or not the church, a group called the Dogma of Angramanu. And now that particular lawsuit has been agreed to have been dropped after what's called the consecrated host that was stolen from the Catholic Church in Oklahoma City.
Yeah,
has
apparently I'm
been
wrong.
returned.
A consecrated host is not a magic cup. It is a magic cracker.
So what happens
So
to
wait,
the magic
they're serving
cracker?
magic crackers at a black mass?
Oh, well, they're
No, they're going to
desecrating.
defile it.
They're desecrating
They're
it.
defiling the magic cracker.
Right,
At the
so the
black
black mass is the opposite of a mass, is the
Right.
idea, as I understand it. And there's more about it in the article here. We'll get into that from WUND.com.
I want to know what a bunch of Zoroastrians are doing having a black mass. I mean, what do they have to do with the Catholic religion? These are a bunch of mixed up trolls, is what these are, doing a bunch of dumb stuff to get press.
Okay, so I'm not a Catholic. I've never been a Catholic, but maybe if somebody is a Catholic, or maybe somebody can do some research and find out about this consecrated host. How did you find out what it actually was, Mark?
One of
Somebody
my
clue you in?
producers, but
How do you steal the consecrated host? I mean, what do they do with it? It's a piece of
the priest will try to stick it in your
toast?
mouth in order to, you get the sip of the wine, you get a magic cracker, right? You get a magic wine, magic cracker.
It's a cracker, not a piece of bread. Because I remember when I was in
Unleavened bread.
So it is bread. What is an unleavened bread?
A cracker.
So it's like stale bread?
It's flat.
Okay.
It's a cracker.
Got it.
That's what it is. And then through magic, they turn it into
Johnson
the body
is
of
providing
Christ.
sound effects. I thought he was actually eating on the air for a moment there.
And then
Well, I was.
You
but
do
it was a
actually have
cracker.
crackers here. Okay, I got it. Cheez-Its.
you're having a little bit of the body of Christ over there.
Ian,
Now, what do you have to do to
Ian
make the?
freaked out. That was hilarious.
What do you
dude.
have to?
You're
do?
not
What are you
allowed to eat on the air. Ian,
Come on,
we've
you
got
should know-
rules here
you
at
should
Free
know
Talk
better.
Live.
You should know
We're
better
a
by
room
now.
full of anarchists that have rules.
My eating of that cracker was entirely intentional.
Yes, I see that now. Thank you for that. Yeah. How do you? Okay. So what do they do? Do they wave something over the crackers to make them into Jesus Christ?
You pray over them, yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Well, I don't know. Well, I don't know what they do in the Catholic Church
There's
because I know
probably
that,
some hand motions involved.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up Presbyterian Christian, and they have like little pieces of bread in the Presbyterian Church.
yeah,
And I don't know
they're
if there
like
was
Baptists,
some sort of,
only they can read.
I don't know if there was some kind of ceremony prior to the actual consuming of the bread, or if it was just because the priest said that this is the body of Christ, that was good enough.
My question is, if you bless a Cheez-It, does it become a worshiping of Jesus Christ?
Have you, Jesus. Well, only if you've gone to a seminary for 6 years.
David is on the line in San Francisco. David, you're on Free Talk Live with Ian, Johnson, and Mark.
Hey, greetings.
Hi,
Yeah,
David.
and I think, weren't you just talking about transubstantiation?
Transubstantiation is what that word is.
What is that?
Yeah, that's when you, in other words, in the Catholic Church, and maybe even the Greek Orthodox, when you eat the wafer and the wine, you are not eating symbolic wafer and wine.
Right.
You are eating the actual blood and body of Christ.
It's funny because it tastes like a cracker.
Right, it tastes like a cracker and it tastes like wine, but it isn't.
I'm not sure I buy this whole transubstantiation thing.
Or maybe Jesus just tastes like a cracker.
Maybe, hold on. Maybe because you haven't accepted Jesus into your heart, Johnson, that it tastes like a cracker.
It doesn't transubstantiate
Well,
for me.
Yeah, but the dangerous part about this, and if you ever want to read about this, there's a famous old. Wow, you're getting.
Because shouldn't it taste like chicken? I mean, if it actually is Jesus.
That's Ian's joke for the month. Awesome. I'm so glad to sit. I'm glad when I'm here for it.
There's a great author named Joseph McCabe, and he was an old monk. I'm trying to think if he was a monk, and he renounced the monkhood because he just got too sick of the corruption, and he wrote books for 40 years. About 100 years ago. I think he died about maybe in the 1940s. And a great number of books, just fantastic guy. And he gives you all sorts of stuff on transubstantiation, where there's a secret process in the kitchen where they actually turn water into wine and wine into blood and crackers into Jesus. But the scary part about it is, in the old days, you could, during the Inquisition, there was a great debate about whether or not you digested God or whether you crapped him out, and you would get executed either way. There's just no way you could answer a question like that, because if you crapped him out, then you were renouncing God, and if you digested him, then you were more powerful than God.
Ooh,
So
nice.
where does this go in your gut? And so it's just it's a losing argument when you get into transubstantiation.
I don't imagine very many people have ever been to an actual black mass. Seems like Satanism is more of a ghost story than anything that's actually real. But there is a group who is ostensibly setting one up in Oklahoma City, which, by the way, happens to be the same state where at the state capitol there's the Church of, or excuse me, I think it's the Satanic Temple based out of New York. You may recall we talked a few weeks, actually it's been months ago, about the Satanic Temple looking to put up basically a tribute to Satan, kind of a statue essentially.
Right.
Because there's apparently a statue to the Ten Commandments outside of the State House in Oklahoma City.
So they wanted to put a Baphomet.
That's correct. They wanted to have the goat guy with a couple kids at his sides, and they've actually done up this statue, and now they're just waiting for the approval to put it out there. So now it's happening in Oklahoma City again. This time there's a group called Dogma of Angra Mainyu that has rented out the Civic Center. Apparently it's a gathering place operated by the city, and so some people are getting very upset about this. The Catholic Archdiocese filed lawsuit to attempt to stop a alleged satanic group, the Dogma of Angra Mainyu, from having themselves...
Sounds like a Scottish satanic.
I'm probably mispronouncing this last word. It's spelled Mainyu. Anyway, they're going to be having a black mass, and it has been approved. The lawsuit apparently was dropped after the group returned a stolen consecrated host to the church. Now, I don't know much about being a Catholic. I don't know how the consecrated host thing works. It sounded like they give people crackers to eat. How do you steal a consecrated host from a church? How does that work exactly?
So you, when I went through this stuff, it was all about you open your mouth, they stick the cracker in there, right?
Wait, you were actually at the Catholic church?
I have been to Catholic churches, and
you've got more experience than I do then.
But you can also do your sort of hands cupped in a I don't know, this receiving sort of very religious looking way. You cross the fronts of your fingers, but you put your palms together side by side, and you receive the host. Now, if you choose not to eat the host, you can like put it in your pocket or whatever, but you're not supposed to, right? Like the host is for the purpose of, you're eating the body of Christ. So a stolen host in this circumstance, I think, is very suspicious, right? Like it's not stolen. They gave it to you.
So wait, how do you receive it if you don't put it in your mouth?
Like this. You just hold your hands together. You
and
cross
it's just
your
a
front
cracker.
fingers.
It's just a boring cracker?
It's a special magic cracker.
But that's all it is. It's just a cracker, right? Like when I was in
no, it's a magic cracker.
in Presbyterian church, it was just a little piece of bread. Like there wasn't anything special about it besides the claim that it was Jesus Christ. And so
that's what's special about it.
I guess I just don't understand the allegations about the stealing. Anyway, your thoughts are certainly welcome. Maybe they stole a whole box of hosts. How do they sell the hosts?
They don't need a whole box of hosts for a black mass. They just need one.
Yeah, that's what's so weird about that.
Yes, you can get them through like the religious store.
Archbishop Paul Coakley has made repeated requests for the city's leaders to cancel the satanic ritual, this from WND.com, in a publicly funded facility. He said, quote, "I have raised my concerns and pointed out how deeply offensive this proposed sacrilegious act is to Christians, and especially to the more than 250,000 Catholics who live in Oklahoma." He said in a statement on August 21st, WND reported another satanic
There's only
group.
250,000 Catholics in the state of Oklahoma?
The Satanic Temple, based in New York, had planned to hold a black mass on the campus of Harvard University in May, but their event was canceled after an onslaught of public outrage followed national media attention. The Archdiocese of Boston also fought that event. And the Catholics are not the only group expressing outrage about the prospect of a black mass being held at the public civic center of a Bible Belt town like Oklahoma City. Harry Mehet, Vice President of Legal Affairs and Chief Litigation Counsel for Liberty Counsel, said Oklahoma City should not allow its public facilities to be, quote, used by a satanic group for the sole purpose of mocking, insulting, and offending other faiths through a lewd and lascivious ceremony. But that's the whole point of freedom of speech. It's the mocking. It's the insulting. It's the lewd and lascivious stuff. That's the stuff that needs to be protected. It's the offensive speech. It's the stuff that people are pissed off about. The people don't want to see. That's the point behind the First Amendment. That's behind, the point behind the various different state constitutions protecting free speech, because it's popular speech. That stuff doesn't need to be protected. It's the unpopular speech that needs to be protected, and this is a perfect example of it.
It's the truth, and the Founding Fathers said as much in their documents that unpopular speech is what needs protection. Your popular speech doesn't need protection.
And what would Jesus do in this circumstance anyway? I mean, wasn't Jesus known
wielding a cat of nine tails is still in the picture. That's a possibility.
What does that mean?
A whip. He drove out the bankers out of the temple.
Okay.
So, I don't know what Jesus would do. You'd have to ask him.
But Jesus wasn't he supposed to be this peaceful guy? I mean, the Prince of Peace. He was supposed to be in favor of forgiveness and understanding. That's the Jesus that I like to think existed, if indeed he did exist. But it doesn't sound like a lot of these Christians really understand those teachings at all. Otherwise, they would be, accepting and loving towards the Satanists, rather than so afraid and so angry about them.
Well, I think that...
Wouldn't they? I mean, didn't Jesus hang out with a whore at one point, as well as some other undesirable, unwashed folks?
Tax collector. I think that if you ask me what I think Jesus of the Bible would do, I would say that he likely would ignore trolls. He would not feed trolls. That's the best circumstance here. And this what the Christians are doing in this circumstance. Some of the Christians are doing. I don't know how to describe this. The Pharisees are doing. Because most Christians don't care. Most Christians in and out of Oklahoma don't care.
I wonder about that.
I like hearing the argument from Christians when there's a direct quote from Jesus where he specifically says, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Yeah.
Let's go to Alex in Knoxville, Tennessee. You're on Free Talk Live, listening online via TuneIn. Hey, Alex.
You there?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the group you described, what were they called again? Who's running the Satanic Mass? And
the Dogma of Angra Mainyu.
Angra Mainyu is actually one of the very first monotheistic religions, Zoroastrianism, Persian religion. Angra Mainyu is the original devil.
Yes.
He is in the duality of Zoroastrianism. You have Ahura Mazda, who is the sort of creator god, the god of all good. And then Angra Mainyu is sort of the original devil,
Yes. He is the weight, the other side, the yang to Ahura Mazda's yin, right?
Yes, and generally I think he was portrayed much more powerful than sort of Satan is within Christianity,
Yeah.
Is more of just instead of being the fallen angel type, being a god, almost on the level, but, still prophesying the ultimate triumph of the good God over the evil God. But that's where that comes from.
So what you're saying is the Angra Mainyu character is more powerful than a Satan character.
Yes. So
I would generally say yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's accurate. At this point, I don't know that much about Zoroastrianism, but as I understand, the Angra Mainyu is not a created being, whereas Satan is a created being, and God could get rid of him immediately if he wished to, but apparently wants to visit all the evil that Satan visits upon us through Satan, and there's a lot of evidence to that in Job.
Alex, if you have more to say, hang on. We can bring it back after the news, and we can talk more about this Angra Mainyu and this alleged black mass that's upsetting people in Oklahoma City. How do you feel about it? 855-450-FREE. Do you support free speech, or do you think that offensive speech should be shut down? Apparently, some Christians think the latter. It's Free Talk Live. You take control. We're talking about a character tonight that I've been introduced to this evening. I did not know who the Angra Mainyu is, and we've been learning about that. Actually, Alex in Knoxville called in. What started all this, though, is a news story from WND, WorldNet Daily, talking about Oklahoma City, where the Dogma of Angra Mainyu, an alleged satanic group, although this seems to have nothing to do whatsoever with Satan, as we were just having explained to us, the Angra Mainyu is something that predates Satan, is not actually a created god, as Mark, you were explaining, is essentially...
I would contend that Angra Mainyu is, one of the many names of Satan. Not Satan, but
he came before Satan.
The concept of embodied evil that we call Satan in our society.
Well, the way the Dogma describes it is essentially that it's kind of the destroyer, basically. That, in life there is creation and destruction, and that is the opposite, essentially, of the creator. So this sort of opposite force.
Well, but it's the destruction of the oppression of freedom. So,
well, that gets in a little bit deeper. Let's bring Alex back in here from Knoxville. And so there's a supposed black mass going to take place in Oklahoma City. Some Christians are all up in arms about this. Alex, your continued thoughts. Go ahead.
Yes, actually, one of the points that Mark was making there about, the embodiment of evil, this seems to be, or whatever, they want to put it out. But, I mean, when you think about the roots of what people think of as Satanism, they go back to, about 1960, probably about 1965, maybe. There's no such thing as a historical religious Satanism. I'm sure Mark is probably at least familiar with a character named Anton LaVey.
Yeah, we were talking about him earlier tonight.
Yeah, he was not in any sense religious, but it seems like in the wake of his creation of the original Church of Satan, there have become these groups that it seems like they often try to relate themselves to an older concept, because probably the most prevalent of them is the Temple of Set, and these are the ones that have started cropping up to make it more of a try and put actual religious belief as this figure, this Satan figure, is an actual entity. But like the Angra Mainyu, they go back to an older concept. They go back to the Egyptian god of Set, which obviously their interpretation of it is probably completely ahistorical to what Set would have actually represented.
Sure, I mean, they have as much difficulty as like the many of the Wiccans and the pagans trying to reconstruct a religion rather than sort of have it given to them, passed down.
Yeah, the problem with a lot of the pagans, I myself am actually, I guess you broadly say, a pagan, but we do try. The group I'm involved with do try and reconstruct things. Most of them don't even try. They will pretty much just throw a mishmash of things together. I'll describe a ritual. Actually, once I attended, there's a yearly thing called Pagan Pride Day, where people will usually get together. It's mostly like a cookout in the park kind of deal, or meeting in a Unitarian church.
And where is this? This is in Knoxville?
It's a nationwide thing.
Okay.
Actually, probably worldwide Pagan Pride Day is.
Gotcha.
But I don't really fit in that well, because I actually am interested in sort of in the historical reconstruction of these pre-Christian beliefs, and they really weren't. They essentially did a ritual derived from medieval ritual magic, ceremonial magic, which actually for the time was more either Christian, Muslim, or Jewish in origin. But it's derived from that. It's, as a friend of mine who is also a Freemason said, it's kind of like a bad knockoff of Masonic ritual.
So are you saying, I'm sorry, maybe I'm not understanding. You're saying that the paganists that you went to this event with didn't really know what they were doing?
Well, to them, they knew what they were doing, because they probably should be more correctly classified as New Age, sort of and kind of the self-help, not necessarily self-help kind of way, but sort of
they're the crystals and
feels good.
The crystal folks.
Yeah, exactly. The dancing in the square in a pink tutu.
To you, that's not pagan. Pagan's like what? Worship of the earth, or what?
It's actually trying to reconstruct a little bit about what people actually did and how they lived their lives.
Would you describe yourself as a pagan?
I prefer the term heathen, but it's sort of culturally specific.
Hey, Alex, thanks for the call, man. I appreciate
like
you sharing tonight. Toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733. So the story here from WND.com about the purported Black Mass. Some of these Christians are upset. In fact, there's even been apparently a petition that is being signed. This is by the TFP Student Action.
I don't care whether they're signing a petition or not. I would care who you're handing it to.
Well, I imagine they're going to hand it to the government. The government in Oklahoma City runs
if they
the
hand it
Civic
to
Center.
the church, the Satanists, then I would be fine with it. Hey, look, there's these folks in the community that would prefer that you not do this.
Go away. Yeah, that kind of
stop
thing.
that.
The TFP Student Action Network has launched an online petition to urge the city, so not asking the Satanists, urge the city to stop the event from going forward. The quote from the one of their litigators at Liberty Counsel says, quote, "The perverted sexual deviance characteristic of a black mass ought to remain in the dark tombs and catacombs where it originated, and should not see the light of day in a civilized society, much less on public property," he said. TFP started August 13th with a goal of 50,000 petition signers and has already garnered 67,000 petition signatures. Well, what do you know? Shutting down free speech is a relatively popular idea.
Well, you can get you can get a petition signed for anything. I mean, the famous one is the Penn and Teller sent out somebody to get dihydrogen monoxide banned.
That's right.
And it's water.
That's water.
Right, it's water, and they talk about how
people signed it.
It's in everything you eat, and it kills people. And both of these are accurate statements. Water's in everything you eat, and it does kill people.
Well, I just think it's good that at least in the United States, for all the critical things that we say about it here on Free Talk Live, freedom of speech to some extent does exist here. Now, obviously, there are some things you can't say in certain venues, like you can't say the F-bomb here because we're on FCC licensed radio stations. So certainly we can poke holes in the claim that the United States has free speech, but as long as groups like this alleged satanic group have the right to perform their black mass on public property, then to some extent free speech still lives. And
the right to complain.
Yeah.
And perhaps lampoon a bit.
So, according to the TFP message that went out with the petition, they said, "Please spread the word to all your friends so we can stop this sacrilege. Your voice and prayers were decisive at Harvard University. The black mass there was stopped, canceled. St. Michael won a great victory that day, and God can win again." Well, isn't
I'm not
that
sure
funny?
who St. Michael is.
Doesn't that come back around to what you were saying to some extent, Mark, about how if God created Satan, and Satan's such a this bad, undesirable thing, couldn't God just wink him out of existence?
He could, absolutely. But the idea, like, there's this line of study called apology, and the people who do
the
it,
Christian apologists.
Yes, Christian apologists, and they have all kinds of explanations for this. But what you need to consider
for why Satan's allowed to exist.
Yeah, why God continues to allow him to do that. I'm not going to come up with them because I think it's nonsense.
Well, yeah, I don't believe in Satan,
but nor do I.
Yeah.
But I think that it's what we need to look at is that. Judaism came from Zoroastrianism, Christianity came from Judaism, Islam came from Christianity. These things evolved over time. You couldn't get a better religion than a religion that says you must believe what I say or you will go to hell, damnation for all of eternity. Yeah, that's the kind of high level of cost for a low level of commitment that it would take to have a world-spanning religion like Christianity.
We will come back with more.
Islam's no better.
About the Dogma of Angra Mainyu. That's the group that is wanting to put a black mass on. You can share your thoughts or whatever you want to talk about. We're talking black mass. That's a pretty unusual topic, but the Christians in Oklahoma City, some of them, including the Catholic Archdiocese, so up to the highest levels in some churches, have come out swinging against a group calling themselves the Dogma of Angra Mainyu, which is sort of a dark deity that precedes Satan, even though they're being called Satanists. The website of the Dogma of Angra Mainyu, which is dogmaofangramaiyu.com, doesn't actually mention Satan anywhere, so I'm not sure where they're getting that this is a satanic black mass, but nonetheless, the proposal is to have a black mass inside a public building, publicly owned Civic Center Music Hall, which is one of those city-operated venues,
right?
Where you can hold a convention or something like that, or a concert.
They made taxpayers pay for it, and now they rent it out.
Right?
My cousin needs a job. Here's what we ought to do: we ought to build a venue and then just put him in charge of renting it out.
Yeah,
the kind
Does
of crap.
Keene have one of those?
Does what? Keene have one?
Like a civic center?
They've tried very hard.
There was a discussion. Keene is where we're doing the show from, by the way, in New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah.
There was a discussion here about having some sort of Keene Convention Center, which I'm sure would be mismanaged into total failure. But the city does have certain properties. There's an old Masonic building right next door to the library.
Oddfellows, is that the Oddfellows building or no?
Nope, it's a Masonic building. Okay. It's right next door to the library where the local public access television station is located. There's a large hall there that could probably hold a couple hundred people, but nothing humongous. No big convention center or anything like that. Now, according to the story,
I'm just inspired when you say Masonic building, like to go down there and just start make some sort of small website where you just start taking pictures of any sort of like symbols around the place.
Dude, I went in there once. Years ago, I went into the Masonic building, and
I did too.
Were you there for that?
Yes, we went traipsing around, looking at all the odd things they had there.
Yeah, so what happened was the guy who runs the cable access channel took us on a tour of the rest of the building, because the idea was that Cheshire TV, the access channel, was going to expand into the rest of the building. So we got to go in the Masonic orders rooms or whatever, and there was some creepy stuff in there. I swear to you, there was some kind of a skull with like a light bulb inside of it.
I can't remember.
A crystal skull.
I don't know if it was
in the
crystal.
Temple of Doom.
I don't think it was that nice. It was more of like a prop or something. I think they might have used it to, talk about how illuminated they are or something like that. I don't know.
Sure.
Total speculation on my part. But I went back there within the last year, and I went up and just poked around, and all that stuff was gone. So they moved it all out to
they
where
probably
to go.
moved it into what may or may not be underground catacombs underneath the building, obviously.
No, I think they moved it to wherever it is the Masons hang out now, because they're still around. They just don't hang out in their old building. So
they're in a wooden building. What kind of sense does that make?
I know
Masons
a bunch of people
in
are
a
Masons,
wooden building,
but I can't be one because I don't believe in the Jesus or the God or whatever. It's just higher power.
So this is an interesting article, I think, and there's more here actually that's very interesting. The excuses as to why they don't think free speech, certain Christians here speaking out as to why they don't think free speech should apply to the Satanic Black Mass. And of course, this is interesting given that Christians claim to be the ones who are persecuted, but yet in this case it's Christians who are using the government to persecute the alleged Satanists.
That's because they're already being persecuted. They're just persecuting back.
So, the Black Mass ceremony has traditionally been performed, this according to WND.com, by satanic cults to mock the Catholic Church's celebration of the Holy Eucharist. Dogma of Angdamanyu clearly celebrates the Destroyer in its description of its beliefs on its website. It promotes itself as, quote, a religious and educational church dedicated to Angdamanyu. Angdamanyu is seen as the Destroyer. This is coming from an ancient Middle Easterner and Indian perspective of the principle of creation through the destruction. Systems and structures must be dismantled so that new life can be born. Weber said such views, while abhorrent, are to be pitied more than anyone else. This is Travis Weber, the director of the Center for Religious Liberty at the Family Research Council. He says, quote, we need to remember to speak the truth in love, and this means that there is a sense of sympathy for the people who are caught up in this evil. Yet there is still the matter of speaking the truth and opposing any invitation for the devil to be involved in public events and the public square of our nation, which this is an attempt to do. He goes on.
So this is interesting. I mean, it's... what it's doing is it's pitting sort of the government of the people, by the people, for the people against freedom of religion. Because what he's claiming here is that, look, you are the government, and you should have a say about what you think about the devil playing a role in the government, because these people believe the devil's real.
Mm-hmm.
And so, get your opinion out there versus the freedom of religion, which is to say that you can worship the devil if you wish. So it really just sort of depends on, are you for the Bill of Rights or are you for the Constitution? Because the Constitution's a document intended to bind the government, the people of the government. The Bill of Rights is a document intended to outline the rights of people and individuals.
I like the Bill of Rights. Not bad.
And they are bound together, but forever pulling each other apart, because the Constitution gives a bunch of people who should have no power over your life, power over your life. Like, for instance, these nosy little bitty bodies, and the people who took the money for the Civic Center in the first place. So all those folks are given their power through the Constitution, and then the Bill of Rights says that you've got the right to freedom of religion and freedom of speech, and those are just in the First Amendment. There's stuff after that. So it's kind of interesting what this guy's looking at. I'll take rights. I'll take freedoms and rights over government strictures any day.
Here's his big argument. He goes on to say, even legally speaking, one could argue that this is not what the founders had in mind when they had written the free exercise of religion into the amendment. But first and foremost, people should let their opposition be known, primarily by standing up and saying, hey, with all the problems going on in the world, why this now? Why do we want this for our community?
Most of the problems in the world spring from people's religions. I mean, to some extent or another. So consider for a second that it's you're poking into people's business that really is the problem.
Well, and that is really the thing, actually, because when you think about it, how would the founding fathers and how would people generally handle it during those times? I mean, most of the founding fathers would probably say, "Well, this is rather juvenile," like they'd just be like, "Whatever," like they'd let it go on, and people would probably generally just ignore it. It would either be like that type of thing would be ignored or not allowed to happen because they wouldn't be able to get access to a place to do it because no one would want to show up or be associated with folks doing that because it's kind of a juvenile thing to do. It's very just attention seeking. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum is that I think most of the religious folks would just be like, we don't want to have anything to do with this. This is dumb, and would ignore these attention-seeking people to the extent that they wouldn't bother.
Right. The problem here is the government and the forcible extraction of wealth from people for the Civic Center. The problem is that this is a government-run facility. If this was an individually run facility, there would be nothing that could be said. If I'm running a hall where we have conventions, because I could run that
they could still protest you.
They can do whatever they want on the sidewalk.
They could claim they'll never come to any events anywhere at your location ever again.
Goodbye.
Well,
I can make that decision. If they walk onto the property, I can turn a fire hose on them. I think a lot of people probably consider the idea of going to work for the government at some point. And I wouldn't doubt for a second that governments, different government agencies look at your search histories, ask your ISPs for that information and look for search histories just as a course of getting a job.
Yeah, that's great. And then, tonight they'd be looking at my search history going, well, why have you been to both dogmaofangraminu.com and .net? I'm just curious.
That's what that's what this is really sort of about with, these kind of things is you never know. Like you go and look a lot of things online. The fact that I've been to Docraminu or whatever the .net here doesn't mean that I'm a Satanist.
I don't think it even means that they're Satanists because the word Satan doesn't appear anywhere on their About Us page.
Well, on the doctorofangraminu.net site, it says that it's the devil's religion.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So are they two different? Are they two different churches?
There's two different websites. There's doctorofangraminu.com and doctorofangraminu.net. But
so
I don't.
The controversy here on WorldNet Daily is that the dogma of Angraminu is out there in Oklahoma City allegedly setting up what's called a black mass. So they've got themselves a polling question because freedom of speech matters to people in America, right? Well, apparently not the people watching this website, WND, WorldNet Daily. Here's their question. Sound off on U.S. city allowing satanic black mass. Should I give you the answers before I tell you in which order?
Give them to me beforehand.
Okay, so let me pull up. Okay. You know what? I'm trying to find the list of them without giving you the actual results. I'll just give them to you randomly. So, it's about time. The Constitution guarantees freedom of worship for all faiths.
I like that one.
What's the big deal? Christians always complain when their religious liberty is restricted. I don't like it, but I support the right for Americans to have the Black Mass. It was inevitable since government kicked out the God of the Bible long ago. Today's radically secular interpretation of the Constitution makes such abominations inevitable. And finally, it's an abomination and God will likely judge the city severely.
I'm going to say that one was number one.
Yeah, it was number one with 61% of the votes, 206 people voting, followed by it was inevitable since government kicked God out of the Bible long ago with 21% of the votes, and then 10% of the votes with today's radically secular interpretation of the Constitution makes such abominations inevitable. So if you total that up, that's, 80, 90%, 92% of the votes on this website went
That's
towards
really
those.
pretty predictable with WorldNet Daily. I mean, that's the shtick that they've got. You know, it's all religious conservatism.
Right.
They used to have this libertarian
Freedom's okay
streak.
for them, but not for the rest
Indeed.
of you people.
Yeah.
Not for you offensive people.
That's the problem. Is that the thing with freedom is that you need to give it to everybody.
Yes.
The people that you don't want to have it, they're the ones that need to have it. Otherwise, you don't have freedom.
He who would control others will only find himself controlled. Let's go to John, listening in Carson City, Nevada. John, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hi, guys.
Hey, what's on your mind tonight?
I think you made some perfectly fair criticisms of the Christians trying to shut down the Satanists. But I was wondering if you found anything in the behavior of the Satanists that was worthy of criticism.
Okay, just to recap for our new listeners, people just tuning in, there's an alleged satanic group, which I don't believe is actually a satanic group. They appear to be worshiping Angra Mainyu, which is a concept that came before Satan, before the whole Christian doctrine. But anyway, all I know about their behavior is they want to rent government property. They want to rent a civic center in Oklahoma City. The Civic Center has approved the rental because they're a government-run property and they have to allow anybody to rent the place. I don't know if they've done anything illegal or anything wrong or anything like that, so I'm not sure what you're getting at.
Well, they did want to desecrate a consecrated host, which the Catholics take to be the body and blood of Christ. Do you think that comes from a spontaneous religious evolution, or I mean, to me, it seems like a gratuitous insult.
Yeah, I would say
of course
it's
an insult. That's what a black mass is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the inverse.
It's supposed to be an insult?
Oh, absolutely. The black mass is basically kind of the inverse of a Catholic mass. They're supposed to be desecrating things that are sacred to Catholics.
Desecration kind of sounds like an insult.
Yeah.
I mean, consecration, desecration.
It's not, that's what they want to do. That's their thing, and they should be able to do it. The only issue was there was apparently an alleged stolen consecrated whatever it is. What was it called?
Stolen. This is interesting, right? So this is a kind of a contract law dispute. When the priest hands over the host, the body of Christ, the
host, that's right,
the little cracker to you. There is an implied contract, I guess, that you are going to take this and eat of it, and be religious and stuff. And instead, you take it, you slide it in your pocket, you wander out, and then you desecrate it, whatever that might mean to do to it. That I'd say that you are, to some extent, you're violating a contract that was, in place, an implied contract.
Yeah, so I don't know if I agree with you there. If somebody gives you a piece of bread and you don't want to eat it,
yours to do with as you please. If you don't want people desecrating your bread, you shouldn't be handing it out.
But we don't really know what they meant when they said a stolen consecrated host. We don't really know how it was stolen or the circumstances around that.
I think that's exactly how it was stolen.
John?
Yeah, I think so too. But, I agree with Ian that, of course, they should be allowed to do it. And, of course, it's wrong to try to stop them. But if this were a case of, say, bigots who had discriminated against another group, then I would also say, well, of course they should be able to do it. But I think you guys on Free Talk Live would be having a very different conversation, and you would find things to criticize in the bigotry. So here you take what you admit to be, an intended insult, but you find nothing to criticize in that.
Well, I think
I guess you didn't hear the whole dialogue where we were calling it juvenile, or at least I was anyway.
Yeah, I think it was using terms
I
like
hate religion.
troll.
I am bigoted. I say it right up front. I'm very open about the fact that I'm very bigoted against religion, and yet I was the one with the strongest criticisms and called it juvenile.
Well, I said trolling behavior more than at least a half a dozen times.
Well, I don't find this as near as offensive. I don't think it's as bad of an offense for someone to essentially poo-poo on another person's religion versus attacking another person because of, let's say, the place they were born or some sort of, color of their skin, for instance. I think that...
Well, say, attacking, say, just not serving them in your business. Is that an attack?
Nope, I would not say that.
I wouldn't say it is.
Nope.
And I did point out that I think that this all comes down to the tragedy of the commons. I didn't use that terminology, but I pointed out that the this place, wherever it is, this civic auditorium thing, is it's public property, and because it's public property, or at least it was publicly funded, that means that everybody's got to have their rights there. Which the converse of that means that if it's not a public property, you should be able to do whatever you want.
Yeah. I guess my point was that you guys have a great deal of sympathy for certain groups, very little sympathy for organized religious groups.
Yeah.
And so therefore, when they're the object of insults, you really don't have that much to say about it. Now, it's been called juvenile and trolling.
Would you be calling us if this article had been about the KKK and we didn't have sympathy for them?
What if it was about the KKK?
And we weren't having sympathy for them? Would you be calling us and be like, well, you guys didn't have sympathy for the KKK. Hey, you're obviously biased.
Well, I'm not following that.
Well, I
think that's my choice, isn't it?
I think we would probably we have supported Christians that get on the wrong side of the law on this one. It's when people want to use the law in their favor that we tend to go after them. I think you're right that we tend to be.
Unless they're members of the groups that you favor, and then in which case,
not all ideas are equally valid.
Hang on, we'll come back with more about this in moments. It's Free Talk Live. John is in Carson City, Nevada, and it sounds like he's trying to call us out here for some level of inconsistency. And John, if you don't mind, can you sort of recap the point you were trying to make in the last segment for people just tuning in?
Sure. I think that you guys have a different take on an issue depending on your sympathy with the group. If it's a group that you're sympathetic with that is wielding the state against someone else, then that gets downplayed, and you spend most of your time talking about how you would deal with the bigot in a free society, or how it should be done properly. But if it's a group you're not sympathetic with, like in this case, organized religion or the Catholics, then you spend almost the entire time talking about how terrible it is that they're wielding the state. Well,
I'd like to point out we've been talking about Stefan Molyneux over the past few days, several days on Free Talk Live. He's definitely somebody with whom I'm sympathetic. I mean, I agree with a lot of things that he says. Yet we've been highly critical of his use of the state. So I don't agree with your assessment.
I don't either. I think it's funny. I think you're projecting a lot here because you're completely ignoring, for example, Ian very specifically mocked the fact that this, whether or not they're Satanists or not, but the supposedly Satanist group for using a state facility. I mean, he mocked them for the fact that they're using this, government
I don't think
recreation
I mocked them for that,
You
did I?
did. Yeah, you did.
Okay.
You mocked them. I mean, you said,
I don't remember
the fact that they're actually using that or making use of that particular facility.
Well,
right. Well,
so
I mean,
John, I don't think I
hopefully-
disagree. I don't think I disagree entirely with your point that we do tend to take sides here on Free Talk Live. However, what we tend to do is take the side of the person who has the least amount of power. Not the one that's going to win, but the one that has the least amount of power. And in this case, it is the trolling, pretend Satanist people who are being attacked by several major religions. And those religions, they don't need anybody rooting for them. They've got plenty of lockstep, mind-numb, mouth-breathing morons that will step in and root for them. But in a free society, it's my opinion you should root for the little guy, because when you root for the little guy, you're rooting for yourself, and because you are the little guy when it comes to government and when it comes to organized religion. That's I guess where we generally do.
Is always the guy who the gun is pointed at.
In this case, the gun is
down the barrel of the gun. You're the little guy.
I'm going to lampoon and mock anybody who's using the state to try to control peaceful others. In a lot of cases, we see that with the Christians. Now, if the Christians are being attacked, I'm going to defend them. I'll defend their right to have themselves whatever kind of mass or ceremony that they want to have. It's just that they're on the attack in this particular case.
So if these Satanists had been doing say, rituals to insult women, and there were women who were trying to get the state to intervene to stop this, you'd be mocking them? That really doesn't sound like you so much, Ian.
I think we'd have to.
Well, it's not exactly what you guys do.
Okay. Well, thanks for the observations, John. Appreciate hearing from you.
Right.
Toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. That's 855-450-3733.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that last point that he brought
I don't know
up
either.
there.
I mean, I don't support mocking women at all.
I'd mock women if they were trying to use the power of the state. The women that are trying to use the power of the state.
I wouldn't support the Satanists in their mocking of the women, but I support their right to do it if that's what they were doing. Which is, he was just speculating. They weren't doing that.
I think
they very well may be, actually. I mean, I'm sure some people would actually consider this black ritual, as supposedly there's probably going to be a very sexual and,
only
hedonistic quality to this black ritual, according to...
Within the government's guidelines, they're going to have to tone down the black mass. In order,
sure,
maybe. They're not going to
maybe.
be able to have open sex there. There's a no nudity rule, and they can't actually sacrifice a goat because you can't kill animals.
Right.
So all of the classic...
But they're probably going to push the limits to it as far as they possibly
sure will,
can,
yeah.
right? And some people could interpret that as degrading to women, so they may very well be degrading to women in this ceremony. So this could be much more of a literal analogy than he initially thought, and yet still it doesn't really change what we were saying at all, because again, free speech.
Well,
it's the bad stuff that needs to be defended.
I think that John is saying something to the effect of, look, Free Talk Live tends to take the easy cases. We'll defend the gay guys against the straight people, the women against the men, the black people against the white people.
I'm sorry, as soon as you said that, I was just thinking low-hanging fruit? Is that what you're trying to say?
That kind of thing. However, I would like to point out that, first we say that gay people should be able to get married. John's made some great arguments on why they shouldn't. But the other point is that we've defended the Christians that don't want to make cakes for the gays. So we've taken up the other side.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yes, I think that there's a little bit, a tinge, like 51%, that we tend to lean that way. And he's ferreted it out, but I don't think that we're bad about it. I think we're pretty good about seeing where we're bad.
If the Christians were out there doing good trolling, I'd be giving them props.
I'm sorry. I'm a strong proponent of the fact that not all ideas are equally valid. It's just, you don't need to give equal time to stupidity. I'm sorry, you just don't. Certain things are not worth your time and effort focusing on them. As soon as you find out that someone's a rabid collectivist or something, you can start to disregard that person because you don't need to necessarily consider their ideas. You can start to just move on and consider other things and spend your time focusing on more enlightening and educational topics.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.